It all began with a girl standing next to a brown car outside a pharmacy in Rochester, New York, on November 16, 1971. That seemingly innocuous moment would trigger one of the most disturbing cases in New York history. It had been a gloomy autumn day until the sun broke through over Rochester. 10-year-old Carmen Colón had arrived home from school. Living with her grandparents in the Bull's Head neighborhood, the girl, born in Puerto Rico, had adult responsibilities and frequently helped with chores. That afternoon, around 4 p.m., her grandfather, Felix, needed a prescription and asked Carmen to accompany him to the nearby pharmacy. In a moment of unusual insistence, Carmen begged to go alone. After all, she was growing up, the pharmacy was only 2 blocks away, and the perception of safety in the early 1970s was different from today. Felix relented. Small, speaking almost no English, and coming from a financially struggling family, Carmen was, unfortunately, a vulnerable target. Upon arriving at the pharmacy, she asked for her grandfather's prescription, but the pharmacist said it wasn't ready yet. An unusual reaction overcame Carmen. Almost in a panic, she said she needed to leave immediately and hurried out. Customers noticed the strange reaction and watched as Carmen walked to a parked brown car, got into the vehicle, and it sped away. About an hour later, in the middle of rush hour, drivers on Interstate 490 West had their routine shattered by a horrifying sight: a girl running along the highway, naked from the waist down, with a terrified look on her face, desperately waving her arms for cars to stop. Many noticed a car reversing, as if it were chasing the girl. Horrifyingly, amidst about 100 cars passing at 70 miles per hour, not a single person stopped to help. 2 days later, on November 18, 2 teenage cyclists near Churchville found Carmen's body in a ditch, naked and dead. The autopsy confirmed the worst: she had been assaulted, had a fractured skull, a broken vertebra, and deep scratches. Carmen's coat and pants were found hundreds of meters away. Rochester's sense of security was shattered. 2 years after the Carmen tragedy, the memory of the case was still a raw point in Rochester's consciousness. Many hoped it would be an isolated event, but in the spring of 1973, a new horror struck the city, signaling that a serial predator was at large. Wanda Walkowicz was the opposite of Carmen, a feisty, 11-year-old redhead who was always getting into fights in the rough East Side neighborhood of Rochester, where her mother, Joyce, raised her alone after her father's death. Money was tight, and Wanda did what she could to help with household chores. On April 2, 1973, a gray and rainy Monday, Wanda's task was simple: go to the corner store to get milk, tuna, cupcakes, and cat food, totaling $8.52. Around 5:15 p.m., a witness saw her leaving the store and then talking next to a large brown car with the driver. The interaction appeared calm. However, another woman, a few blocks away, claimed to have seen a man force a red-haired girl, whom she believed to be Wanda, into a light-colored Dodge Dart between 5:30 and 6 p.m. At 8 p.m., Joyce became desperate and called the police. Wanda was never late. Nearly 50 detectives and police officers scoured the area, but the following morning, at 10:15 a.m., Wanda's body was discovered by a state trooper. She had been dumped at the bottom of a steep embankment on State Route 104 in Webster, about 15 miles from her home. The position of the remains was horrific. She appeared to have been thrown from a moving vehicle. The autopsy confirmed assault, ligature marks on her neck, and defensive wounds, proving the girl had fought back. The food from the supermarket was still undigested, indicating that she had eaten shortly before being killed. The killer had given her her last meal. There were also traces of fluids and hairs found on Wanda, including a crucial detail: white cat hair, which did not belong to her family's cat. For the first time, the police publicly connected the dots: Rochester had a serial predator, and the city panicked. If there was still hope that Wanda's murder would be the last, it was shattered on November 26, 1973, just 2 days after Thanksgiving. 11-year-old Michelle Maenza was shy and quiet. Her family also struggled with poverty, making Michelle an easy target. That Monday, she was so teased at school that she asked to be dismissed early. The school nurse released her, and Michelle headed out into the cold, gray afternoon, apparently on her way to a nearby shopping center to pick up her mother's purse. The first sighting came from a witness who saw Michelle sitting in the passenger seat of a beige car at a diner, next to a white man aged 25 to 35 with dark hair and dirty hands. Michelle had a frightened look on her face. A short time later, another driver saw a chilling scene on Route 350, a man holding a little girl, Michelle, by the wrist next to his car with a flat tire. When the driver tried to offer help, the man pulled Michelle behind him, blocking the license plate, and stared at the Good Samaritan with such a cold and menacing look that the witness immediately drove away. Michelle was reported missing later that night. 2 days later, Michelle's body was found by a farmer in a ditch in neighboring Wayne County. Like the other victims, she had been assaulted and murdered, with evidence of blunt force trauma. The autopsy confirmed that she had eaten a hamburger with onions shortly before her death, corroborating the diner sighting. More white cat hairs were found on her clothes. For the first time, police found a crucial physical clue at the crime scene, a partial palm print left on Michelle's neck. With the witness descriptions, police created a composite sketch of the kidnapper. The city, already fed up with the terror, was furious, and calls to the hotline skyrocketed, but, as in previous cases, the leads led nowhere. One last heartbreaking detail emerged. Michelle's own uncle saw her that day and offered her a ride home, but she refused, preferring to walk. After Michelle's death, the killer's pattern was impossible to ignore and reinforced that the crimes were not random. 3 girls were gone, each taken in broad daylight. The criteria were specific: all were 10 or 11 years old, came from poor families, had broken homes, and were Catholic. All were taken during weekday afternoons while doing simple errands. And, except for Carmen on the highway, there were no signs of struggle or screams. It was as if they had been convinced they were safe. The most intriguing coincidence gave the case its name: the initials. Carmen Colón, CC, was found near Churchville, C. Wanda Walkowicz, WW, was found in Webster, W. Michelle Maenza, M, was found in Macedon, M. Statistically, it was an astronomical improbability, and the press dubbed the crimes the alphabet murders, or double initial murders. Theories emerged: the killer chose the victims by name, or the letters C, W, M were a provocation, a code meaning "come with me." The investigation was a logistical nightmare involving 4 agencies. Clues such as white cat hair, bodily fluids, and a palm print were promising, but without reliable DNA testing in the 1970s, they were more frustrating than helpful. The only discrepancy was Carmen, who was found naked and with frontal hand marks, unlike the other 2. 3 main suspects emerged over the decades. Miguel Colón, Carmen's uncle, who owned a brown car and cleaned it excessively. He fled to Puerto Rico and, years later, committed suicide after a violent incident, but it was never proven that he was the killer. Joseph Naso, a serial killer with a double initial signature in California, who grew up in Rochester and even had a victim named Carmen Colón. However, his DNA did not match the evidence. Dennis Termini, a Rochester firefighter who molested teenagers during the same period, drove a beige car and had white cat hairs in his vehicle. He committed suicide when police cornered him. In 2007, the exhumation of his body and DNA testing proved that he was not the alphabet killer. With hundreds of suspects ruled out and more than half a century of investigation, the predator has escaped every net. No arrests have been made. The case that haunts New York remains unsolved.